Okay, thank you all for being here today. It means a lot that you're all here. I'm going to be talking about what I have done for the past year. A broad title to my project is Root Cellar Refugee Program Expansion. And so I'll talk more about the organization that I work with and what I created for my capstone. So to begin, I'm going to talk about the Root Cellar. The Root Cellar is a Christian nonprofit organization that's based out of Portland and Lewiston, Maine. It is a wraparound service provider, which means that it does a lot of programs to help immigrant and vulnerable populations in the city. So what this looks like is anything from PSL classes, a food pantry, dental clinics, job training, the whole 9 yards. If there's anything there that can help the community, the Root Cellar is probably involved in one way or another. A little bit more about them. They started in 1984 when a Portland Mennonite church opened up their basement or their root cellar for kids to come after school for a safe place to do homework and just to interact with people. Since then, it's grown out of a heart of hospitality to many other demographics and many other things. Another part of the story is in 2001 through 2003, Somali people started coming to the city of Lewiston. In the 1990s, Somalia faced a civil war. As the civil war broke out, many Somalians immigrated to places like Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And as the conflict continued to go on, many Somalis started thinking about migrating to a third country. So many of them moved to Europe and the United States. So in 2001, a small portion of the Somali population called Somali Bantus decided to move to the city. The city of Lewiston is kind of perfect for this group. It's a rather small city. The radius is about 5 miles in total. And so it's really easy to walk to City Hall, to the schools, to the library, to the grocery store. Another thing about the Somali population is many of them are Muslim. And so a lot of the people were very afraid that their children would move to America and be corrupted by Western values. Because Lewiston is so small, lots of those influences are just not present in the population. Another interesting thing about the city is that it's mainly French Canadian and very, very white. And so when Somalis started coming to the city, it was actually a big problem. There was a lot of racism and not a lot of services provided in the city. Since Somalians had been there for over 10 years, though, a lot of services have begun to be provided for them. The Root Cellar being one of those services. An interesting thing also in Lewiston and in immigration generally is something called a diaspora network. So when one people group starts coming to a place and services start to get better and better, it allows for more refugees to settle in that same spot. So in the last 3 to 5 years, Angolan distributions and other people groups have also come to Lewiston. And so this is an ongoing need in the city. So why the Root Cellar generally? They have worked in wraparound services, but now they want to get into resettlement services. There's a lot of service settlement. There's a lot of paperwork. There's language barriers. There's a lot of things that need done. And so while the Root Cellar has worked with this population, they want to do a better job of doing that. And really will go alongside their neighbors in new ways. The next question, why me? What do I have to do with this organization? Actually, a year and a half before coming to Sattler, I worked with this organization. I got to live among this people group, and I learned so much about them and grew to love them. And so this capstone is a way of giving back to that community in whatever way possible. So this is what I did for my capstone. I had 5 deliverables. I'll just broadly go over them now, and then I'll talk more in depth about each one of them. The first one was a church resource kit that is going to be given to churches in the Lewiston community. I also created a trauma-informed care training for those churches. I did a Bible story curriculum on the story of Joseph I helped found the WOF Club, and then also did practitioner research and interviews. And out of that, I came up with some best practices to give to Root Cellar as they begin this journey of starting a resettlement program. So the first thing is a church resource kit. So between the years of 2022 and 2023, the Biden administration really changed immigration. So prior to this, a lot of resettlement was done through government organizations and subcontracted NGOs. But in those years, the Biden administration opened it up for community groups to also sponsor refugees. This is actually something that's not new. Canada's been doing it for forever, so shout out to Stan. What is making why I know this? And so this is something that I hope to develop at Root Cellar. So what is community sponsorship? It's a group of about 8 to 20 people who walk with a refugee family for a period of about a year. And they do a ton of stuff alongside of the refugee. They meet them at the airport. They help to find housing, employment, education, healthcare, anything and everything. And so this is just a sneak peek of one of the roles and responsibility that I created. So it talks about what this role means to be successful, things to consider. Also, this blue link is very ill represented. I also looked at all of the hospitals, dental clinic, any resource available in Williston and put that in a document. So that if anybody wants to sponsor anybody, everything is right there. They should be good to go, as well as the next steps of what the sponsor needs to do in relation to the refugee family. Also, the end goal is pretty important because while the sponsorship group is helping to integrate a family, the end goal is that that family has access to the same resources as a natural-born citizen here. And so the end goal is that they're on the same footing as everybody else. This is a super important project to me. I finished it fall of last year. I handed it over to the Root Cellar in January. And this June, they're going to be using this training to help guide their first sponsorship group. So some of the stuff that's created is already being implemented, which is super exciting to me. My next deliverable is a trauma-informed care guide and curriculum. So something that I saw lacking in sponsorship circles and the training that I went through is talk about trauma. So written into the definition of a refugee is somebody who's experienced persecution or a fear of persecution. So this is just kind of a part of every refugee. And while I do say that, I do believe it's a label and not an identity. I believe that anybody who has experienced trauma can thrive and overcome that. But it is necessary to acknowledge that and work through that with sponsorship groups. So what I did was create a curriculum that just goes over the basics of trauma, what to do if somebody's experiencing trauma, how to respond, as well as other resources of the community that could guide a sponsorship group to help the refugee get more help. I created a study guide and then also beautiful slides, which I was then able to do kind of like a soft pitch to the WOF Club, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. Moving on to my third deliverable, I did a Bible story curriculum. That's talked a little bit about what this looks like in his context. I also created a similar one. Bible storying seeks to teach ESL along with biblical truth, and it does it in an oral way. So what this looks like is there's a story of about 350 to 400 words where a storier will use motions and repeat the story over and over again. It's a very practical way of learning English. I chose the story of Joseph specifically because it has a lot of themes of immigration, which fits very well with the demographic that I'll be working with. If you think about Joseph's life, his brothers hated him, sold him, he was imprisoned, he was propositioned by Potiphar's wife. He had to acclimate to a new culture and eventually rose in prominence. He also thought he would never see his homeland again, and eventually he was restored to his brothers and his family. So it's the whole swath of emotions in refugee lives. So this was an encouraging product to me because God really worked in the story of Joseph, and he's still really working in the lives of many immigrants today. Another reason why I chose the story of Joseph is the Somali Bantu population is primarily Muslim. So if you say, let's listen to a Bible story, many people will just shake their heads and turn away. However, the story of Joseph is also in the Quran. It's actually the largest story in the Quran. And so this creates a very helpful bridge of something that they're already familiar with. A difference between just a Quranic retelling of Joseph and a biblical storying set is there's a high emphasis on the Messiah and the Messianic line. So I talk a lot about the tribe of Judah and how it relates to Joseph and how eventually the coming Messiah has saved the world. And so there's definitely some themes of salvation throughout this story set. The fourth thing that I helped to create is the WOF Club, which many of you are part of. Big thanks to Graham Weaver. He approached me and was honestly his idea in January to see if I would help him start this. So this was the Sattler community helping to resettle a refugee family over this past semester. This was very helpful because it gave me practical experience of what immigration is like. Previous to this, I had worked in a lot of wraparound services, but I did not understand all the intricacies and still honestly don't understand all the intricacies of what it is to migrate. There's a lot of paperwork and fault and a lot of moving parts, and this experience helped me to just understand that just a tiny bit better. I was also super encouraged by all of you guys who helped to volunteer. It was a good experience to know how to mobilize volunteers and mobilize the church, which is something that will also be done in Maine. But also there are so many people who just fit the role very well, and they just blossomed, and it was really fun to see you guys do that in meaningful ways. Another thing that this Welcome Club allowed me to do is do cultural orientations for Sunday Leave. So what a cultural orientation is when immigrants come to the United States, it's mandated by the United States government that they are presented with all of the opportunities available to them. So this means public assistance, education, transportation, housing available to them. So throughout the semester, I would go down to send relief and tell refugees about how they can integrate into Boston better. This was meaningful because it was the first time I got to work with an interpreter, and I learned a lot more about the processes of what this looks like and how to practically guide someone kind of acclimated to a new culture. My last deliverable was practitioner recommendations. So I reached out to 43 different resettlement agencies and only got in contact with about 13 of them. And this was a wide swath of anybody and everybody. I talked to secular organizations, to churches. I talked to some Muslim groups, to some Christian groups, just trying to get a full range of what the resettlement sector looks like. This was important because the retailers just starting out their programming, and I just want to acknowledge that. There's so many people that have been doing this for so long and who know what they're doing. So there is a set of questions that I asked just to understand how these organizations work, what their institutional setup is. Do they have paid volunteers? Do they have paid staff? Do they have volunteers? And how all this works. This was also encouraging to me because the refugee crisis can look huge, but there are actually so many people out there who are compassionately helping this people group. And that was encouraging to me. Also, tons of churches as well who are doing this and doing this really well. So 3 things that I learned from these interviews that will be taken to the Lewiston context is intentional volunteerism, knowing how to mobilize volunteers in a really good way. Sometimes people will volunteer one time and then they won't come back. And so figuring out how to retain volunteers and how to keep them coming back So your program can be more efficient. It is something that I'll be working with the Root Cellar to develop in the future. Another thing is intentional training. Oftentimes, training can be lacking. Volunteers get thrown into situations, and it's assumed that they have time and knowledge, but that might not necessarily be the case. And so knowing how to balance that is something that will be implemented at the Root Cellar. And then the last thing I learned through this was the need for metrics and evaluation. A couple of these organizations, when asked how they measure success, were not able to give super clear answers, or a lot of organizations see self-sufficiency as the end goal. And while that's very true, there's no definite metrics of that. And so there's a wide range of what self-sufficiency is. That can mean people just feeling happy that they're in the US, or that could mean people have had a job for 6 months and they're paying their rent. And there's different varying models. So that's something that would be taken to the Root Cellar to really establish good metrics and evaluation methods. So what I learned through all of this, a ton of cultural humility. Many times I would be standing in a resettlement agency, and I'm a white woman who has never been displaced from anywhere. And I often ask God, why am I here? And so I learned to trust and depend on God, and also to really reap the benefits from people who know way more than I do. There are many times when I just had to sit and listen and know that I'm actually not knowledgeable and I don't know what I'm doing. And I also hope to pass on that humility onto the Root Cellar, the organization I'm working with. This is a young organization who has a lot of growth ahead of them. And so learned how to partner with different organizations and learned how to work together in the sector. Why it matters. As many of you probably know, I will be living in Lewiston for the summer. And as I said before, some of the stuff that I already created is being directly implemented. But also this picture is super powerful to me, because as you can see, there's a Muslim girl, a little Mennonite girl, and a girl whose mom was trapped in a gang for a while. And all of these are standing beside each other, and we're friends in this community. And I think that's the power of the gospel, and how the Root Cellar can get involved into the community. Through the work that I've done, people can have a sense of welcome and can get to know Jesus in better ways. So that is the end of my presentation, but I will take questions now.